Hi, hello, and 안녕하세요. Today, I'll be reviewing and discussing the South Korean film Blackstone. First, I'd like to preface this review by acknowledging that this isn't a lighthearted movie to sit through. So I can't say it's a film for everyone and anyone to watch. It portrays a host of heavy topics and brutal experiences, which I'll list when I go over the film's content and potential trigger warnings. Nevertheless, it's a creatively and thematically interesting film well worthy of exploring. So let's jump in. Blackstone is a surrealist psychological drama following Shonsun, a young man who deserts the army after a traumatic incident, only to find that his parents have disappeared from their sole home. Thus, he must ultimately journey back to his father's hometown, a small beachside village in the Philippines. Officially released in 2016, Blackstone is the fourth feature film for director Roh Gyeong-tae. As a French-Korean co-production, the film debuted at the International Film Festival Rotterdam on January 23, 2015. Its status as an adult-rated, internationally produced art house indie film made it ideal for the festival circuit, but less so for a domestic market apparently. After screening at multiple international festivals, Blackstone was released to very limited theaters for the domestic audience starting March 28, 2016, going on to gross $1,295 and rack up 299 admissions. The viewer response in terms of numbers is so small as to be negligible. Furthermore, I was unable to locate any substantial English language critics' reviews. Personally, I would have loved to review this film in conjunction with director Roh's other works, particularly his 2006 debut, The Last Dining Table, and his 2008 follow-up, Land of Scarecrows. But as niche art house movies, I couldn't access them anywhere, unfortunately. He seems to be a filmmaker who regularly engages with and portrays characters that are extremely and devastatingly marginalized in Korean society. Loners, the impoverished, the elderly, immigrants, as well as gay and trans people. Be that as it may, this video is focusing on Blackstone, a short yet visually and thematically dense film all on its own. The narrative is broken informally into three parts, with three settings: the Korean military, Seoul, and the Philippines. Cinematographer Cho Young-sung creates a very distinct visual language for Roh's story, using color and composition. Shonsun's army life is filmed with little to no wide or long shots, so you truly feel like you're isolated and in the middle of nowhere, which is disorienting. The conformity, hierarchy, and instilled compliance of the military are disguised as discipline, unity, and national service, but as depicted, actually facilitate suffering, abuse, and loss of individuality in a very rigid and isolating self-contained environment. Seoul itself is a place of despair, and Cho's use of a cold, bleak, blue-green sickly color palette strips back images of the cosmopolitan city as really one of coldness, loneliness, economic struggle, sickness, exploitation, and pipe dreams. Lastly, the Philippines is lensed in complete visual contrast to South Korea. Cho emphasizes its warmth. The colors are warmer, and the shots of wind-shaken trees and jungles, both wide and in close-up, portray openness, vibrancy, warmth, and aliveness. This setting, from the jungles to the bustling village life, is shown to be both a place for family, nature, roots, and the potential for metaphorical rebirth, renewal, or cleansing, but also, as a country of the global south, a victim of environmental pollution, specifically a coastal oil spill from a Korean tanker ship. In this last section of the movie, you can see one of Roh's most significant cinematic influences: Thai art house filmmaker Apichatpong Weerasethakul, and in particular his 2004 film Tropical Malady. Queerness, military service, social realism and naturalism combined with the mythical and surreal, a self-awareness of the exoticized perceptions of Southeast Asia. But still, Roh is coming from a different perspective, and Shonsun's depths of marginalization run deep, especially when juxtaposed with his experiences in his father's hometown. Overall, there's a unique brutality to Roh's film that is all its own. Shonsun is played by actor Won Tae-hee, who you may recognize from Lee Sung-heen's White Knight, which was the second ever review I did for this channel. Won has a talent for portraying difficult characters. people who are tightly strung, very guarded, and sometimes hard to read. In Blackstone, his body language and way of speaking conveys a passivity and compliance, an attempt at smallness, likely due to a lifetime of struggle, discrimination, and bullying. He's difficult to pin down as he's barely determined to merely exist by just getting by, seeming neutral or amenable. Shonsoon encounters a litany of characters, but overall Blackstone relies on a limited but great cast. Baek Hyun-joo and Lee Hae-sung as Shonsoon's parents, Kim Do-bong and Son So-koo as his fellow enlistees, and Linda Villalobos as his grandmother. Most of Shonsoon's interactions with the world are fraught with tensions, power imbalance, despair, and ambiguity. This leads us to the topics of Blackstone's themes, motifs, and queer representation. But importantly, I really need to provide content warnings for this film, because the plot is an unrelenting struggle for Shonsoon, and completely upends the image of Seoul in particular, and Korea in general, as a cosmopolitan, economically prosperous country for all. Warnings include male nudity, graphic sexual assault, discrimination, racism, self-mutilation, suicide ideation, resource, and labor exploitation. Themes are expansive, such as racism and xenophobia, homophobia and ableism, abuse and sexual assault in the military, draft and conscription experiences, the conditions of developed versus developing nations, environmental pollution and industrial contamination, and a wholesale demystification of the mythology around socioeconomic dreams, deeply rooted in national identity and capitalism. Blood is used throughout the film to alternately symbolize disease, roots, and environment, from pollution and contamination of society, human bodies and nature, to potential rebirth or revitalization via nature and family. Pollution and contamination can also be extended to the through line of violation. As I mentioned in my trigger warnings, sexual assault is featured in this film as well as in the trailer, actually. This is not the first time I've discussed sexual assault in the Korean military, such as depicted in 2007's Rainbow Eyes. This is also not the first time I've touched on how conscription shapes and perpetuates certain toxic behaviors of patriarchal masculinity, which can be seen in both Rainbow Eyes and 2014's High Heels. A study I found really puts it succinctly. In studying sexual violence among men in the military in South Korea, they, quote, found a high frequency of physical sexual violence and a high level of repetition of sexual violence. Of perpetrators, 81.7% had themselves been victimized. However, the soldiers tended to minimize sexual violence, preferred not to address the issue if possible, criticized or ignored the victims, and did not trust the reporting procedures in place. The authors found that sexual violence was mobilized as a tool in the military to control hierarchy and to create certain masculinities. Regarding the relevance of masculinity as a salient feature of militaries in general, they believe it might emerge as a common feature across national and cultural differences. As a disclaimer, this is not everyone's experience during conscription, but it is a major injustice that is part and parcel of a larger culture of toxic hierarchy that extends to other forms of abuse like hazing and bullying, and even extends to resulting suicides and even homicides. Power is the motive, not sexuality. Even though the double standard of rape laws in South Korea for civilians as opposed to enlistees certainly prioritizes gender and sexuality. Finally, and most relevant to this channel, how does Roh depict and explore queer identity and experiences in a film already teeming with social, political, and cultural issues, both in Korea and globally? In some ways, the film is very raw, and in other ways, very oblique in its representation choices. It's not about him exploring his sexuality, coming out, romances, or relationships. Shonsoon never directly states or expresses his sexual orientation relative to other people. There is a dream sequence that, to me at least, makes it fairly clear though. His other layers of marginalization along lines of class, family, and heritage certainly leave room to map on queer readings as well. Okay, with as little specifics as possible, I'm going to give a small spoiler. One pivotal plot point in this film involves a character living with an HIV-positive status. In South Korea, there are many, but still a small minority of people living with an HIV or AIDS diagnosis. And ignorance, stigma, and discrimination are still prescient issues. In Blackstone, an HIV status results in a dishonorable discharge from the army. People refusing to touch anything they touched with their own hands, forced quarantining away from others, fellow enlistees paranoid they caught it just by standing next to them, apathy from doctors that won't even make eye contact and make it difficult to get medicine, and disgust from family. That doesn't even touch the experiences and feelings of the diagnosed, the cost and access to treatment, potential existential dread. Furthermore, HIV and AIDS are still socially perceived to be exclusive to LGBTQ+ persons, and in Korea are associated with sickness, filth, and of course, sin. Altogether, I'm giving Blackstone an A-. Again, it's not an easy movie to sit through, and it's mercifully short considering how much its leads and his parents endure. The film matches its brutality of the world with a subtlety of human emotion and experience. Seonsoon and his family's many points of identity, as immigrants, as the working class, as Korean citizens, and for Seonsoon, his queerness, all converge. And at this convergence, they are made to feel by society, consistently and cruelly, that they don't belong, that they're different, alien, and other. An other that struggles futilely against the unaccepting whole. That intolerance affects how an individual or community relates to their world. How you talk, how you move your body, if you make eye contact, how you give and receive, how you express and internalize, and how people in positions of power will inevitably take advantage in order to exploit and abuse. In this review, I focused a lot on themes and messages, so I want to recenter that this is a very character-driven, emotional film where you are swept along on Seonsoon's journey with him. Overall, Blackstone shows Roh Gyeong-tae to be a humanist filmmaker with a clear visual direction and strong sympathy for some of the most marginalized and alienated members of his own society, as well as the Global South. Blackstone is available on Gaga Ulala, the global LGBT streaming service that specializes in Asian-produced film and TV. So if you think you can handle it, please check this one out. Until next time, goodbye, farewell, and 안녕히 계세요.